Has your doctor told you your blood sugar is fine, but you don't feel fine? Or maybe you have a lot of symptoms of blood sugar issues, like you have low energy, you don't sleep well, you have hormone imbalances. Maybe you have a lot of cravings, you're always hungry, or feel dizzy or shaky between meals, and your doctor hasn't said anything about your blood sugar. Well, this is really common, unfortunately, because doctors are usually only looking for very progressed blood sugar issues that they can medicate, because unfortunately, that's their only tool to helping these issues. But that's not what I'm concerned about. What I'm concerned about is helping you know what these blood sugar ranges actually mean. What does it mean if your blood sugar comes back 60? What about if it comes out as a 95? Like, is one good? Is one bad? Is one better? Is one worse? This is what I want to teach you in today's episode. I want you to arm yourself with this knowledge of knowing what you're looking at and how progressed your blood sugar issues have become, because that's often what your doctor is missing. In today's episode, we're going to dive deep into these numbers, what tests you should ask your doctor for, and so much more. Stick around to the end because I have a surprise for you too. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm so happy to have you. And I'm so excited to dive into what numbers you can look at, what tests you can get to see if your numbers are sort of matching to your symptoms. I will say right off the bat that you can be having blood sugar symptoms even if your numbers are coming out normal. This is the point of why I'm having this podcast today, because I need to get this information out there, because a lot of people just think like, oh, my blood sugar is fine because it seems like it's in the normal range. But I'm actually going to show you how to really decipher for yourself by using some of the numbers that I use in my practice. And this is based on some research that I have. And just know that your doctors are not using the latest research when it comes to knowing these issues. So before we dive in, I just wanted to thank today's sponsor for our show, which is Good Idea. Good Idea is that awesome sparkling water that lowers your blood sugar response from a meal by 20 to 30%. You just drink 1/3 of the can before the meal, and you drink the rest of the can while you're finishing your meal, and it lowers your blood sugar from that meal by 20 to 30%. They have amazing flavors. It's really convenient to bring to the beach, bring to a picnic, bring to an outing. If you want to try Good Idea, you can head to their website, goodidea.us, use the code DANIHEALTH, that's DANIHEALTH, for 10% off your first order. And please don't ask me which flavor you should get, because they're all so good that I couldn't possibly make a recommendation, but all I know is that you will not go wrong, because every flavor that they have is amazing. Awesome. So I've linked all that in the show notes or in the description below this video. So if you just want that easy link, you can head there. Okay, let's dive into some numbers. I'm so excited. So the first thing that your doctor may test is your fasting glucose. This is your blood sugar that is being measured after you have slept overnight. You wake up, you go to whatever LabCorp, or you get it tested by your doctor, or you test it at home with a finger prick meter. And that is your fasting glucose number. You've been fasting for upwards of 12 hours or 8 hours at least, right? So your doctor will probably say that anything under 100 is fine, but I disagree with this. So I will say the ideal number for blood sugar is generally around 72 to 85 milligrams per deciliter. By the way, if you are outside of the US and you're listening to this episode or watching, please get your calculator handy. Every number that I say in milligrams per deciliter, you can divide by 18 to get the millimoles, or if we say millimoles, you can times by 18 to get the milligrams per deciliter. All right, so sorry, I do not have all these numbers memorized in millimoles, but again, just divide by 18 and you'll get the number that works for you. Okay, so again, optimal blood sugar would be between 72 and 85. Now, there is a caveat. If you feel terrible at these numbers, then there is very still likely some blood sugar dysregulation happening. And I'm kind of going a little bit out of order in my head, but what this might mean is that if you feel terrible and your blood sugar is at like 84, it means that there's very likely already quite progressed insulin resistance that is causing you to be metabolically inflexible and not be able to tolerate being at these lower numbers because your body doesn't have the ability to easily burn or utilize stored fuel for energy. So it's at that number, if you don't feel well, it's probably because it's sending you signs to go get more energy because it can't use the energy that's stored on your body, meaning the glycogen in your liver, which is just stored sugar, or your body fat stores. Okay, so that's the optimal range, and then we have that caveat. So what's often missed, which I want to go into right away, is everyone starts talking, okay, 72 to 85, okay, what happens when it gets higher? I'm going to call out, hey, what about all my hypoglycemic friends out there? This was me. What if your blood sugar fasting is lower than 72? What does that mean? Or, what is that a problem at all? Because isn't lower better? No. Just like Goldilocks, it needs to be in this happy place. Not too hot, not too cold. And for our blood sugar, not too high, not too low. Okay, so if your blood sugar is really below 70, sometimes that can be okay for people, especially for people who are fat adapted, they've been doing keto and fasting, it could be okay. So if you have a blood sugar number that is lower than this, fasting, and you feel fantastic, then I would say it's okay. However, if your blood sugar is 71 or below, mine was 60 or 63, and you feel dizzy, shaky, hangry, anxious, lightheaded, like you're going to pass out, sweaty, nauseous, all those fun symptoms, weak, tired, dizzy, fatigued, that means that this is in the hypoglycemic range. I'm not diagnosing anybody, but this range would be more of the hypoglycemia. And it's never listed anywhere. So even on these amazing blogs that have this information, that's not put on there. So when I had PCOS in 2013, I went to a ton of doctor's appointments, and at 3 of them, when I got blood work, my blood sugar was 60 or 63 every single time, and I almost passed out. I took this step backwards like that. I remember I almost fell backwards. It was crazy. And so my blood sugar was not doing well down there. So now moving on, above 85, we have this 86 to 99 range. So I feel that the people who are the hypoglycemics may be very much missed unless they're coming in with drastic symptoms of hypoglycemia that they're sharing with their doctor and that this doctor knows. I had these symptoms. No doctor said boo to me. No doctor said anything about my blood sugar being 60. So that they are often missed. Now we have these 86 to 99 people, and they are also always missed by doctors. I will say always, because if you have a conventional doctor that's saying anything when your blood sugar is in there, I mean, kudos to them. It's very rare. So these are the people where there is likely already some progressed insulin resistance that is driving the blood sugar to stay higher in the blood because the insulin, it's knocking on the doors of the cells saying, hey, I have some glucose for you. And the cells are like, no, I don't hear anything. You were already here. So they're not listening to the sound of insulin. And so the glucose can't get out of the blood and into the cells. So that now the amount of sugar in the blood already starts coming up. But this can happen years after insulin resistance has already started occurring. So we could technically have optimal blood sugar, yet still have higher insulin and insulin resistance. So we're going to go into this in a minute. So you can, like I said, you can still have perfect blood sugar, but not have perfect metabolic health, okay? So now we're in this 85 to 99 range, and there are already going to be probably higher insulin and some metabolic symptoms of dysfunction. So at this range, we might have the hormone issues, the sleep issues, excessive hunger, cravings, all those symptoms that I was listing on last week's episode. You can go back and check that if you want to hear more about the symptoms. So we can already start to have some dysfunction. Now, this is where I default to what your doctor will say. So if your fasting blood sugar is now 100 to 125, that is considered the pre-diabetic range. That's not the only test, I believe, that they use to get a diagnosis. But again, I'm not really concerned with the diagnoses. It's helpful to know potentially how to treat something, because someone who has really high blood sugar is going to need something a little different than someone who has really low blood sugar. But all of these things, unless it's type 1 diabetes, because that's autoimmune in nature and they have not found a cure, unless it's that, anywhere we are on this spectrum of blood sugar dysregulation, we can heal it. We can fix it. We can come to optimal. So I'm not super, super concerned with the diagnosis, because it doesn't really matter, because it can change so quickly. So this, though, the 100 to 125 fasting, if that's you, we're looking at potentially this pre-diabetic range, which also means there's significant insulin resistance happening. And what's very common at this range is that you may feel like your blood sugar is dropping low, and that your blood sugar is not actually low when you feel these drops. Okay, so this is super common. I started talking about again in last week's episode, but you might start to have these spikes and these drops, and maybe once it gets to around 100, your body starts panicking and freaking out. So that same analogy that I gave last week is that, let's say I'm in this room, feels comfortable temperature. I go take a really hot shower, or I go in a sauna for like 15 minutes. Now I come out, now the room feels cold. So I need to put a sweater on. I need to turn up the heat. Well, it was only because my body was used to being at such a higher temperature. Now this regular temperature feels comparatively cold. So it's the same thing with our body, where it's used to the blood sugar sitting higher. So now it goes low relatively to what it's used to being at, and the body starts panicking. The body turns on the brake light and the gas light in the car and says, you need to fuel up right now because we're low, we're about out. And that's because it does not see that it has this stored energy, the glycogen in the liver and the body fat. It's not seeing that. Because why? Because the insulin puts the blinders on the metabolism so that we can't utilize this energy. So it thinks, oh my gosh, we're almost out of fuel, so you better go eat something, because at this stage, your body is dependent now on just the food that you're eating to really get energy. It's not very good at getting energy beyond that. So you're going to be driven to eat more and more frequently. You're not going to feel full as much. You're going to feel like you need that little sweet after your meal. That like, I just ate, but I'm still hungry. Like, why can't I fill up? I feel like this bottomless pit. So that is really, really common when we're getting into this pre-diabetic range. And then again, I'm defaulting to what the doctor says. At 126 and above fasting, that is considered that type 2 diabetic range. All right, so that is a fasting glucose test. And remember, a fasting glucose test, if it's in the normal range, it can rule out prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, but it cannot rule out insulin resistance or hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia. Okay, so we can have, let's say, that 83 fasting blood sugar, which in my mind, I would be like, oh, that's perfect. We could still have high insulin, so it doesn't rule out the insulin resistance. We could feel like garbage, right? We feel super shaky and dizzy and lightheaded. So that may mean that we are hypoglycemic, or that we have reactive hypoglycemia or some sort of metabolic dysfunction. Okay, so moving on, let's move to A1C. A1C is an average of your blood sugar over the last 3 months. Okay, so with averages, we can have highs and we can have lows, and then our average might look perfect. So an A1C is not the best measure because it's just not specific enough. So if I'm someone who comes in and my blood sugar is really spiking and crashing and spiking and crashing, I could have a perfect A1C. So again, an A1C cannot rule out that we are having issues with our blood sugar. It can't rule them out. It can rule in issues with blood sugar for sure, but it cannot rule them out. So when we have our blood sugar, so the ranges that the doctor uses would be, if you're below 5.7, then you are, then you're normal, totally optimal. But again, I'm going to disagree with the doctor here. And I'm going to say that probably about a 4.7 to about a 5.2, I would say is optimal or ideal. So I would even potentially say like 4.7 to a 5.1 is even closer to optimal. Then we have, and so the reason I'm saying this, so a 5.1, just for your reference, usually means that the average blood sugar is about a 104. So I don't think that with a 5.6, your doctor saying, oh, you're not pre-diabetic anymore, you're at a 5.6, and some people are very happy with this number, but it means that your average blood sugar is a 122. So that's actually pretty high. So I don't think that that's ideal. That's not ideal to me. So that would be something that I would disagree with the doctors on. So a 5.2 average blood sugar of 108, it's still a little bit high, but we're getting better. So I would say anywhere from like a 5.3 to a 5.6 is similar to that like 85 to 99 range with the fasting. It's that it's not yet a disease, prediabetes. It's not yet a disease, but it still needs work. And I will guarantee that you have blood sugar issues and that you do not have metabolic flexibility. So at those numbers, I still think that we need to do some work. Then again, I'm going to default to the doctor's ranges for prediabetes and diabetes. So 5.7 to 6.3 is prediabetes for A1C, and then 6.4 and above would be diabetes. Okay, so that is your A1C. I think that the A1C is most helpful for people whose blood sugar is sort of not having a lot of variability, meaning not going high and going really low, but sort of this like very steady line. A lot of people have higher, and this is often the case for people with type 2 diabetes, that their blood sugar is just like staying super, super high. And so if you're getting it down, you would definitely see like, okay, cool, I went from a 10 A1C to like a 7. That's a huge difference. That's a huge improvement. So I do like measuring A1C against yourself. However, if you're a person, let's say you came to me and you were having lots of blood sugar spikes and crashes all the time, and let's say your A1C was 5.0, which is fantastic, but your blood sugar wasn't fantastic, right? What we might see is that as we improve blood sugar, your A1C is actually going to go up, and it may go to like 5.5, which is not where I want it to be, because you're getting the flattening of the curve, but now you're seeing that it's going up a little bit. So that is, it's not necessarily that it got worse, it's that you're just having a different pattern of blood sugar and it's picking it up in a different way. So it's not super specific, but it is a helpful number to measure against yourself. Okay, now let's talk about insulin. So fasting insulin is another good number that we can check. Fasting insulin is different from fasting glucose. Glucose is sugar, right? Insulin is a hormone that tells the sugar what to do, brings it certain places. So these are different things. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, I got my fasting insulin tested. I get it tested all the time. If you haven't asked your doctor for it, chances are you have not ever gotten a fasting insulin test. Chances are if you ask your doctor for it, they will say no. I'm serious. They don't know how to interpret this test. They don't know what to do with this information. The range that your doctor will typically use is 2 to 20. This may be different outside of the country. So again, use some online calculators to figure out the difference for you. But they have a range of 2 to 20. I personally use the range of 2 to 5 for fasting insulin. I want or like 1 to 5. So we want low insulin. So if you're already at like a 6 or an 8 or a 12, you're going to start to see some significant issues happening. So if your doctor's like, oh, you're at an 18, you're fine. Again, not fine, not fine. So I want to see that fasting insulin in about a 2 to 5, 1 to 5 range. And then anything above that, you may start having symptoms of insulin resistance and blood sugar issues. I'm going to say there's another caveat here. There's a big group of people who have reactive hypoglycemia who have normal fasting insulin. And that is because there's certain types of reactive hypoglycemia that's not caused by insulin resistance. I feel that most often hypoglycemia and reactive hypoglycemia is driven by high insulin or insulin resistance, but there's some people where it's not. It's driven because you're too sensitive to insulin, so that you have good insulin sensitivity, so the insulin's working well, but it's almost working too well, suspiciously well. And so we might get a big giant release of insulin at a meal, and then it puts away too much sugar because we have too much sensitivity to it. Oftentimes that is due to GLP-1 issues from just inflammation in the body causing lipopolysaccharide release. So this is something that I'm going to go into in my upcoming hypoglycemia and reactive hypoglycemia course. I think it's going to be called Sweet Stability, not sure, open to feedback on that name. But I am going to address all that in there, so I'm not going to go into it here. But again, if you are having that normal insulin, fasting insulin, then you might find that it's because of the hypersensitivity to insulin. The other thing is an oral glucose tolerance test. I have personally not looked at these, so I don't know the ranges. So if that is one of the tests that you can get to see if you have issues, and oftentimes you get false positives because you're drinking this glucose solution. And it's like, who would drink just glucose? It doesn't happen in nature. So I do recommend, if you get that test, to have it done if you're able to do like a mixed meal test instead, because it would be more representative of something you would actually eat. So I would definitely try that. And then there's also this HOMA IR thing that you can do when you get your insulin and glucose. And I'm looking it up right now. HOMA IR, and we're going to look up the normal ranges. So the normal range, I don't use this very often, as you can tell. So typically we want the high insulin sensitivity would be less than 1, and then insulin resistance is starting around 1.9. So I don't even see how that really makes sense. So I guess we want it to be around the 1 mark and as low as possible. And then significant insulin resistance would be over 2.9. But I really like just using the fasting blood sugar marker. So just as an example, this HOMA IR, you have to go online and use a calculator. And like I said, you put in your fasting glucose and your fasting insulin. So someone with an 85 fasting glucose, which is right on that border of being great, and then a fasting insulin of 2.4, which is also great, their HOMA IR is 0.5. And again, we said we went below 1. So that would check out. That's how good that is. So that is the HOMA IR score. Again, you can use this if you have those two numbers to determine this level of insulin resistance. And that is the stuff that you can really get from your doctor. So the other option of the other numbers that we really need to pay attention to are numbers that you're going to find on this continuous glucose monitor. So there's a bunch of companies that sell glucose monitors, because here in the US you need a prescription to get one. So there's several companies that will give you the prescription because they have their team of doctors, and then they can also help hook you up with the device. So I am going to be sharing all of those. If you follow me on Instagram, which you all should, Danielle Hamilton Health, in my Instagram bio link, and I can link it below this video and also in the show notes of the podcast, you will see that I have a bunch of links to all of these different brands that sell the glucose monitors. And so you can get some discounts there. And if you're outside of the country, the good news is you can get this over the counter. Live in Canada, you can go to Costco and get it. So it's amazing. So with the glucose monitors, this gives us a really good idea of what's happening after our meals. So there's a couple of numbers to keep in mind. Number one, after we eat a meal, we really don't want our blood sugar to spike over 30 milligrams per deciliter. And I know that one offhand is 1.8 millimoles. So we don't want to see more than a 30-point spike. We also don't want our blood sugar going over 140 because that is automatically just inflammatory for our body. Some people with type 2 diabetes, their blood sugar never goes below 140. So think that this is a very inflammatory state for the body if your blood sugar is sitting that high all the time. Personally, I don't love to have my blood sugar ever go over 120, and I feel really good and my best if I keep that range more tightly controlled. So even going from like 70-ish to like 110. And so I wouldn't want it to go from 70 to 110 in a meal, but if it were to go from like around 70 to around 100, that would probably be the biggest spike that I would want to see. Remember, when it comes to blood sugar, the name of the game is stability. We want to keep our blood sugar as stable as possible, but we also cannot expect a flat line. If your blood sugar is flatlined, it means that you're dead. So somewhere between that flat line and that really stable, just these rolling hills or like little, just like squiggles, that's what we want to see on a continuous glucose monitor, okay? So one of the things I see is that there's people whose blood sugar is dropping low after meals and they're feeling symptomatic. So whether their blood sugar is actually dropping below 70 or 60 or 50, that's the real hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia. So this would be people whose blood sugar is going into this actual low range and they're getting true lows. That would be in the hypo or the reactive hypoglycemia area. If it's only happening after meals, like basically you feel great all day and then you eat a meal and then this happens, that's more true reactive hypoglycemia. But if it's like, oh, my blood sugar is kind of going low, sometimes after a meal, sometimes if I haven't eaten, that's when it goes really low. Overnight, it's going low. Again, that's more the hypoglycemia. Then we have these people where they're feeling like their blood sugar is going low, but it's really not that low. It's just comparatively low. And that's still potentially people with hypoglycemic symptoms. People, it could be someone with reactive hypoglycemia where this is happening after those meals. And it could be someone who has insulin resistance or prediabetes. But remember, the worse the metabolic dysfunction, the more insulin resistant you are, the more likely you are to feel lows at higher numbers. Okay, and this is not that it's not your blood sugar. It still is your blood sugar. It's the metabolic dysfunction underneath. Okay, so then I think that's about it. So these are the numbers that are really, really important after a meal. We really want to keep that blood sugar stabilized. We want to see it coming back down within about 2 hours. We don't want to see really quick ups and quick downs. So we want to see a gradual rise and a gradual decline. Because remember, any quick change for the body is stressful. The body doesn't like it. It like will overshoot the corrections because it's like, this was too much of a change. And so it will like really quickly try to get you back to homeostasis. And oftentimes that's the reason why people crash so low after a meal, because they spiked so quickly and the body's like, oh my gosh, we need so much insulin right now. So it will shoot you with insulin and then it overshoots because it doesn't even know, because it's like, oh my gosh, we just need to get some out. And so it didn't have a time to like calibrate, like, oh, how much insulin does she need? Let's give her a little more. It's just like ton of insulin. And now we put away so much blood sugar that now the blood sugar goes accidentally too low. And then we're in that craving zone. Then we're in that danger zone. Our body is sensing there is an emergency, and so we're driven to eat more carbs again. Okay, so I hope that this information has been helpful for you. I hope that it starts to really put together the pieces of what could be going wrong, what numbers we want to look out for. And I am going to be creating a free mini course called Sugar Savvy, which is going to put all this information into other videos, but also into like charts so you can see what I'm doing here, because sometimes just hearing these numbers, it feels like a lot of numbers. So if you know some of your numbers, it could perhaps be helpful, but I'm going to put it into a mini course that's a really good guide for you to help you understand all of this. So I hope that you will, hopefully I'll be able to link that freebie underneath this video and get that for you, because I want you to be able to know what to do with these numbers, know how to talk to your doctor, know how to get the support that you need, but also know how you're progressing and know what's normal and what isn't, and not be gaslit by your doctor because you're having these blood sugar symptoms at 120 and they're like, no, it can't possibly be that. I'm going to send you to psych to go get an anxiety med. So I want you to be armed with the knowledge to be able to know, is this normal? If it's not, how do I proceed? So thank you again for listening to this episode. Thank you for rating, reviewing, subscribing, sharing. I really, really, really appreciate it. All right, everybody, I will see you next time. Bye-bye. If you have loved today's episode and want to dive even deeper to gain a deeper understanding of your blood sugar numbers and how to use continuous glucose monitors or finger prick monitors to understand your numbers, you are in luck. I have created a program called Sugar Savvy that is your complete guide to glucose monitoring. You're going to learn all about the tests that you should ask your doctor for. We're going to go even deeper into understanding your blood sugar numbers. We're going to talk about continuous glucose monitors, which devices are the best, do they hurt, how to use them, what blood sugar numbers you might see or what patterns you might be experiencing, and how to use finger prick monitors to verify those numbers that you're getting and to use those if you can't get access to a CGM. Honestly, we dive into so much more. It costs $99, but if you use the code SUGARFREE, you get it absolutely free, because I really want to help give you this understanding and arm you with the knowledge to take your health into your own hands so you can start improving your blood sugar and feeling better. Head to the link that I provided in the show notes to sign up for Sugar Savvy, and don't forget to use the code SUGARFREE to get your program absolutely free.